The phone rang at 2:47 a.m. Bank of America. I almost didn't answer because, honestly, who gets legitimate calls from banks in the middle of the night? But something in my gut told me to pick up. The woman on the other end sounded professional but urgent. "Ms. Thompson, this is Sarah from Bank of America's Mortgage Division. I'm calling about the mortgage account under your name and your sister Amanda's. We've had 3 consecutive missed payments and need to discuss immediate action to prevent foreclosure proceedings." I sat up in bed, my laptop still warm on my chest from working late on a client presentation. "I'm sorry, what mortgage? There must be some mistake. I don't have a mortgage with my sister." Dead silence. Then, "Ma'am, according to our records, you co-signed on a $340,000 mortgage for the property at 2847 Maple Street, approximately 6 months ago. The account shows your social security number and signature on all documentation." My hands started shaking, not the kind of nervous shaking you get before a big presentation, but the deep, body-betraying tremor that happens when your reality just shifted on its axis. "I never signed anything. I've never even been to 2847 Maple Street. What's the full name on the account?" "Jennifer Marie Thompson and Amanda Lynn Thompson. Birth dates match our verification system. Ms. Thompson, if you're claiming fraud, we need to start an immediate investigation. But I have to inform you that this mortgage default is already affecting your credit score." I hung up and immediately pulled my credit report. There it was, in black and white digital horror. A $340,000 mortgage I never knew existed, 3 missed payments of $2,147 each, and my credit score dropping like a stone from 745 to 680 in just 3 months. The property address led me to Google Street View, where I stared at a modest 2-story house I'd never seen before in my life. But here's what really made my blood run cold. I recognized the neighborhood. It was 15 minutes from where my sister Amanda lived in her apartment, the same apartment she'd been complaining about for months, saying she couldn't afford to buy a house on her teacher's salary. My parents would never do this to me. That was my first thought, followed immediately by a dozen memories of smaller financial boundary crossings. Dad asking to use my credit card for emergency car repairs. Mom borrowing my identity information for insurance purposes. Small things I'd brushed off because, well, they were family. I called the bank back and demanded they email me every single document. What I saw when those PDFs hit my inbox at 4:23 a.m. changed everything I thought I knew about trust. My signature was there, all right, but it wasn't my signature. It was close, really close, like someone had practiced it. But I've been signing my name the same way since I was 12 years old. And I know the exact pressure I put on the double L in my middle name. This version was smoother, more deliberate. Someone had forged my signature, and they'd done it well enough to fool a bank. The mortgage application was dated March 15th. I remember March 15th perfectly, because it was the day I was in Chicago for a 3-day conference. I had boarding passes, hotel receipts, conference photos. There was no possible way I could have been in 2 places at once, yet somehow my signature appeared on documents processed that exact day. I spent the next 6 hours going through every document with a forensic accountant's eye. The application listed my employment information correctly, my social security number, even my mother's maiden name for verification. Someone had done their homework. Someone with access to my personal information had methodically set up this fraud. But this was just the beginning of what I'd discover. By 7 a.m., I was dressed and driving to my sister's apartment. Amanda answered the door in her pajamas, looking genuinely surprised to see me. "Jen, what are you doing here so early? You look terrible." "We need to talk about your mortgage." Her face went white, not confused white, guilty white. The kind of pale that happens when someone's worst secret just walked through their front door. "What mortgage?" she stammered, but her eyes were already darting away from mine. I pulled out my phone and showed her the Bank of America account summary. "This mortgage, the one with my name on it that I never signed for. The one that's destroying my credit score because you've missed 3 payments." Amanda sank onto her couch, and I watched my little sister transform before my eyes. The person I'd grown up protecting, the one I'd helped through college and breakups and career changes, suddenly looked like a stranger. "Jen, I can explain. It's not what you think." "Really? Because what I think is that someone forged my signature on a $340,000 loan without my knowledge or consent. What I think is that someone committed identity theft and bank fraud. What I think is that my own family decided my credit score was worth less than their real estate ambitions." She started crying, but these weren't the tears I'd comforted hundreds of times before. These were the tears of someone caught, someone scrambling for an explanation that might preserve what was left of our relationship. "Mom and Dad said you'd understand eventually. They said family helps family, and you've always been the successful one. They thought maybe if we got established in the house first, we could add you properly later, make it legitimate." The audacity hit me like a physical blow. They'd planned this. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment desperation move. My parents had sat down, discussed using my identity without permission, decided my financial future was theirs to gamble with, and convinced my sister to go along with it. "Amanda, do you understand what you've done? This isn't about helping family. This is fraud, criminal fraud. My credit score has dropped 65 points in 3 months. I could be held legally responsible for a debt I never agreed to." She kept crying, kept talking about family loyalty and how they'd make it right, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was calculating the timeline, the planning, the systematic nature of this betrayal told me everything I needed to know about how my family really viewed me. I wasn't their daughter or sister. I was their financial resource. I drove straight to my bank and requested a complete credit history, going back 2 years. What I found in that conference room, surrounded by printouts and highlighted discrepancies, made my 2 a.m. phone call look like the tip of an iceberg. There were credit cards I'd never opened, utility accounts in my name at addresses I'd never lived at, a car loan for a vehicle I'd never seen. My family hadn't just forged one mortgage signature. They'd been systematically using my identity for almost 18 months. The mortgage was just the one that got big enough to trigger bank attention. I spent the next week building a case against my own family. I documented every fraudulent account, every forged signature, every unauthorized use of my personal information. I consulted with an identity theft attorney who looked at my evidence and whistled low. "Jennifer, this is one of the most comprehensive family fraud cases I've seen. The systematic nature of this, the planning involved, the dollar amounts. We're talking about serious criminal charges if you decide to pursue them." But I wasn't ready for criminal charges yet. I was ready for something much more devastating. To people who had raised me to believe family came first. I was ready to give them a chance to make this right before I destroyed them. I scheduled a family dinner for the following Sunday, just like we'd done every month for the past 5 years, gathering around Mom's dining room table for pot roast and small talk. Except this time I came prepared. I brought a folder full of documentation, every fraudulent account, every forged signature, every piece of evidence that my family had been systematically stealing my identity for over a year. I also brought my friend Melissa, who they knew well enough, not to question her presence, but who also happened to be a paralegal with experience in fraud cases. We made small talk through dinner. Dad complained about work. Mom fussed over whether everyone had enough food. Amanda talked nervously about her students. Normal family conversation while I sat there knowing I was about to detonate their world. After dessert, when everyone was relaxed and comfortable, I opened my folder. "So, I got an interesting phone call last week," I said, pulling out the mortgage documents. Bank of America wanted to discuss the mortgage I apparently co-signed with Amanda. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Mom's smile froze in place. Amanda stared at her plate like it might offer her an escape route. "Now the funny thing is," I continued, my voice perfectly calm, "I don't remember signing any mortgage documents. In fact, I was in Chicago on March 15th when these papers were supposedly signed. I have receipts." I placed the boarding passes on the table next to the mortgage application. But here's where it gets really interesting. I pulled out the credit card statements, the utility bills, the car loan documentation. It seems like this isn't the first time my signature has appeared on documents I never signed. In fact, someone's been quite busy with my personal information for the past 18 months. Dad finally found his voice. "Jennifer, honey, we can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can explain. But first, let me finish sharing what I've discovered." I placed each piece of evidence on the table methodically, like I was presenting a case to a jury, which, in a way, I was. Credit card at Best Buy, opened last January, used to purchase a 65-inch television that happens to match the one in Amanda's living room. Electric bill for 2847 Maple Street, the house Amanda now lives in my name. Car loan for a 2019 Honda CR-V, which I believe is parked in your driveway right now, Mom. My mother had gone completely pale. "We were going to tell you." "When? After my credit was completely destroyed? After I got sued for debts I never incurred? After the bank foreclosed on a house I didn't know I owned?" Amanda started crying again, but this time I felt nothing. No protective instinct, no urge to comfort her. She wasn't my little sister anymore. She was a co-conspirator in a fraud scheme that had been systematically destroying my financial future. "We needed help," Dad said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he'd used when I was a child. "Family helps family, Jennifer. You've always been the responsible one, the successful one. We knew you'd understand eventually." "Understand what, exactly?" "That you decided my credit score, my financial future, my legal liability were all acceptable collateral damage for your real estate ventures?" Melissa, who had been silent throughout dinner, finally spoke up. "From a legal standpoint, what you've described constitutes identity theft, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. These are federal crimes with serious prison time." The word prison hit the table like a bomb. "Now wait just a minute," Dad said, standing up. "This is family business. We don't need lawyers and legal threats. We can work this out." I stood up too, and for the first time in my life, I was taller than my father. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. "You're absolutely right, Dad. This is family business. And here's how family is going to work from now on." I pulled out a typed document I'd prepared with my attorney. "You have 48 hours to transfer the mortgage entirely into Amanda's name, removing me completely. You have 48 hours to close every fraudulent account and transfer any balances to accounts in your actual names. You have 48 hours to provide me with written documentation of every single time my identity was used without permission, along with a plan for making full financial restitution." I placed the document on the table between the dinner plates and evidence folders. "If you choose not to comply, on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., I will file criminal charges for identity theft and bank fraud. I will pursue civil damages for every penny this has cost me, plus punitive damages for the systematic nature of this fraud. And I will make sure that every person in this family's social and professional circle knows exactly what kind of people you really are." The silence was deafening. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, could hear Amanda's sniffling, could hear Dad's angry breathing. "You wouldn't destroy your own family," Mom whispered. I looked at each of them in turn, the people who had raised me, who had taught me about love and loyalty and trust, the people who had decided that those lessons didn't apply when money was involved. "You already destroyed this family when you decided my identity was yours to steal." I packed up my evidence, hugged Melissa goodbye, and walked out of that house knowing I might never walk back in. 48 hours later, at 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday night, I got my answer. Not a single document had been signed. Not a single account had been transferred. Not a single acknowledgement that they'd done anything wrong. Instead, I got a text message from my mother. "We're disappointed in your selfishness. Family forgives family. We expected better from you." They had chosen money over me. They had chosen fraud over honesty. They had chosen to double down on their betrayal rather than make it right. So Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I gave them exactly what they'd earned. Wednesday morning at 9:01 a.m., I walked into the FBI's Financial Crimes Division with a briefcase full of evidence and a heart full of resolve. The agent who met me, Special Agent Rebecca Chen, had seen enough family fraud cases to know exactly what she was looking at within the first 10 minutes of my presentation. "Ms. Thompson, this is one of the most systematic family identity theft schemes I've encountered. The planning, the duration, the dollar amounts involved. We're looking at multiple federal charges here." By 10:30 a.m., the wheels of justice were in motion. Bank fraud charges were filed against all 3 family members. The mortgage company was notified of the fraudulent co-signature. Credit bureaus were contacted to begin the dispute process. And most satisfying of all, every single fraudulent account was immediately frozen pending investigation. But I wasn't done, not even close. While Agent Chen processed the criminal complaints, I drove straight to my attorney's office, where we filed civil suits for identity theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The damages we sought weren't just for my financial losses, but for punitive damages designed to send a message that family ties don't excuse criminal behavior. Then came the part I'd been anticipating most, the public accountability phase. I'd learned something important about my family over the years. They cared more about their reputation in the community than almost anything else. Dad's position as a deacon at their church, Mom's role in the PTA, Amanda's standing as a respected teacher. Their social status was everything to them. So I made sure their community knew exactly who they really were. I started with a carefully crafted Facebook post, complete with redacted court documents and a timeline of the fraud. I tagged mutual friends, extended family members, and community organizations they belonged to. The post was factual, documented, and devastating. I'm sharing this publicly because I believe our community deserves to know when trusted members engage in systematic fraud. Over the past 18 months, my immediate family has stolen my identity to obtain over $400,000 in credit. When given the opportunity to make this right, they chose to continue the deception. The attached court documents speak for themselves. Within hours, the post had been shared 47 times. Comments poured in from family friends expressing shock and support. Several people mentioned they'd had their own small financial issues with my parents that suddenly made sense in this new context. But the real avalanche started when Amanda's school district caught wind of the criminal charges. Teachers undergo background checks. Teachers are held to high moral standards. Teachers definitely aren't supposed to be co-conspirators in federal fraud cases. By Thursday afternoon, Amanda was suspended pending investigation. By Friday, she was terminated. My parents' church was next. The pastor called me personally to verify the information before their next board meeting. Dad lost his deacon position by Sunday. Mom was quietly asked to step down from her PTA leadership role. Their social circle, built over decades, evaporated in less than a week. The mortgage company moved fast once they understood the scope of the fraud. Amanda received notice that the entire mortgage was being called in immediately. No payment plan, no negotiation, no grace period. When you obtain a mortgage through identity theft, banks don't tend to be understanding about your housing situation. Within 2 weeks, Amanda was evicted from the house she'd stolen my identity to obtain. She moved back in with our parents, which created exactly the kind of toxic family dynamic that made everything worse. Because here's what happens when a criminal conspiracy collapses. The conspirators turn on each other. Dad blamed Amanda for being careless about the payments that triggered the bank investigation. Amanda blamed our parents for convincing her this was acceptable. Mom blamed me for destroying the family instead of working things out privately. The unity they'd shown during their fraud operation completely disintegrated under legal pressure. But the sweetest justice came from an unexpected source, their insurance company. You see, when you commit fraud to obtain property, your homeowner's insurance policy becomes void. When your homeowner's insurance is void and you file claims for normal home maintenance issues, that becomes additional insurance fraud. When investigators dig into your financial records because of federal charges, they find patterns of inflated insurance claims stretching back years. My parents didn't just lose their reputation and their deacon status. They lost their home insurance, faced additional fraud charges for previous claims, and had to pay back over $30,000 in settlements the insurance company now considered fraudulent. The ripple effects kept expanding. Dad's employer, a local construction company that valued trust and integrity, decided that employing someone under federal investigation for fraud wasn't good for business. He lost his job of 15 years. Mom's part-time bookkeeping clients, mostly small local businesses, found other accountants when word spread about her creative approach to financial documentation. By month 3 of the legal process, my family had lost their jobs, their home insurance, their social standing, their church community, and most of their friends. All because they'd decided my credit score was theirs to gamble with. But I wasn't feeling victorious yet. I was feeling strategic. The civil suit was proceeding exactly as planned. Their attempts to hide assets were pathetically transparent and easily discoverable through legal channels. The criminal case was building momentum as federal investigators uncovered even more fraudulent activity than I'd initially discovered. And then something beautiful happened. Other victims started coming forward. My cousin Maria called me in tears. She'd always wondered how our Uncle Carlos had suddenly afforded his new truck 2 years ago. When she saw my Facebook post, she checked her credit report and found a $35,000 auto loan she'd never signed for. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who'd known my family for decades, mentioned that her elderly mother had complained about mysterious credit card charges. After my situation became public, Mrs. Patterson investigated and discovered that my mother had been using her mom's information for small purchases over several months. A former coworker of my father's reached out to say he'd always suspected something fishy about a construction loan Dad had mentioned, especially since the paperwork had required a co-signer with better credit. By month 4, the FBI investigation had expanded to include 7 additional victims and over $600,000 in total fraud. My family hadn't just betrayed me, they'd been running a small-scale identity theft ring for years, targeting elderly relatives, family friends, and anyone who trusted them enough to share personal information. The federal prosecutor assigned to the case called it one of the most brazen family fraud operations she'd encountered. The systematic nature of the crimes, the targeting of vulnerable elderly victims, and the complete lack of remorse demonstrated by the defendants made this a priority case for her office. But the moment I knew true justice was being served came during the plea bargain negotiations. My attorney called me on a Thursday afternoon with an update that made me pull over to the side of the road. Jennifer, they want to plea bargain. The federal prosecutor is offering reduced sentences in exchange for full restitution to all victims, complete financial disclosure, and allocution where they have to state exactly what they did in open court. What kind of restitution are we talking about? Everything. Every fraudulent charge, every fee, every point of credit damage, plus punitive damages. For you specifically, they're looking at $127,000 in direct restitution plus $200,000 in punitive damages. Your parents will have to liquidate their retirement accounts, sell their house, and probably declare bankruptcy to cover all the victim restitution. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, letting that information sink in. They were going to lose everything: their house, their retirement, their freedom, their reputation, their family relationships, everything they'd tried to build on the foundation of other people's stolen identities. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that this wasn't revenge. This was consequences. Justice has a particular feeling when it finally arrives. It's not the hot satisfaction of revenge or the bitter pleasure of getting even. It's cooler than that, more substantial. It's the deep, quiet knowledge that the universe has been rebalanced, that actions have led to appropriate consequences, that the moral order has been restored. That's what I felt 6 months after that 2:47 a.m. phone call, sitting in a federal courthouse, watching my family allocute to their crimes. Amanda stood first, her voice barely audible as she recited the script her lawyer had prepared. I knowingly participated in a conspiracy to commit identity theft and bank fraud. I used my sister's personal information without permission to obtain a mortgage I could not qualify for on my own. I understand that my actions were criminal and caused substantial financial harm to the victim. My father went next, his voice stronger, but his words just as damning. I planned and orchestrated the systematic use of my daughter's identity for financial gain. I convinced other family members to participate in this fraud. I showed no remorse when given the opportunity to make restitution voluntarily. My mother's allocution was the hardest to watch, not because I felt sorry for her, but because she still couldn't take full responsibility, even in court. I participated in financial activities that I knew were wrong. I should have stopped this behavior instead of enabling it. The judge wasn't impressed with her half-hearted admission. Mrs. Thompson, that allocution is insufficient. You didn't just participate in financial activities. You stole your daughter's identity repeatedly for over 18 months. Try again. The second time, she managed to say the words that mattered. I committed identity theft against my daughter. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway. Their sentences reflected the systematic nature of their crimes. Amanda received 2 years in federal prison plus 5 years probation. My parents each received 3 years plus 7 years probation. All of them were ordered to pay restitution to every victim, with my portion totaling $327,000. But the money, while significant, wasn't the real victory. The real victory was walking out of that courthouse, knowing that I'd single-handedly dismantled a criminal enterprise that had been masquerading as my family. I'd protected future victims by ensuring these particular criminals faced real consequences. I'd stood up for myself in a way that created a new foundation for how I would handle every relationship going forward. Most importantly, I'd learned that family isn't defined by blood or shared history. Family is defined by respect, trust, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The people who raised me had failed that test spectacularly. 2 years later, my life looks nothing like it did the night that phone rang. My credit score isn't just restored, it's higher than it's ever been, sitting at a perfect 847. The restitution money allowed me to put a substantial down payment on my own house, legitimately, with my own credit and my own signature on every document. I started my own consulting firm, specializing in helping identity theft victims navigate the legal and financial recovery process. Turns out, experiencing systematic family fraud gave me expertise that traditional consultants simply couldn't match. My business is thriving, built on the foundation of helping people who've been betrayed by the people they trusted most. The house I bought is beautiful, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a yard perfect for the dog. I adopted 6 months after the criminal trial ended. Luna is a rescue just like me, and we've built a life together that's peaceful in ways I never thought possible. I have friends now who know my whole story and choose to be part of my life anyway. Real friends who understand that trust is earned through consistent action, not demanded because of history or blood relation. My chosen family is small but genuine, built on mutual respect and authentic care. The holidays are different now, but they're better. Instead of obligatory family gatherings filled with underlying tension and financial manipulation, I spend them with people who actually enjoy my company. Thanksgiving with my friend Melissa and her family, Christmas with my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, whose mother turned out to be one of the most delightful people I've ever met once she was protected from my mother's financial predation. I've learned to cook for people who appreciate the effort rather than criticize the seasoning. I've learned to give gifts that are received with gratitude rather than assessed for their monetary value. I've learned what it feels like to be loved for who I am rather than what I can provide. Amanda was released from federal prison 8 months ago. She sent me a letter, a real letter, handwritten on actual paper, attempting to apologize and asking if we could rebuild our relationship. I read it twice, then filed it away without responding. Some bridges, once burned completely, shouldn't be rebuilt. Some relationships, once corrupted by criminal betrayal, can't be salvaged. Some family ties, once severed by systematic fraud, are better left cut. My parents were released 4 months ago. They declared bankruptcy as predicted and moved into a small apartment across town. Dad found work with a different construction company that was willing to hire someone with a federal fraud conviction. Mom works part-time at a grocery store, a significant step down from her previous bookkeeping business. They've never apologized. Not once in over 3 years have either of them acknowledged that what they did was wrong. They've told extended family members that I overreacted and destroyed the family over money. They still frame themselves as victims of my vindictiveness rather than consequences of their own criminal choices. This tells me everything I need to know about whether they've actually changed or whether they're simply sorry they got caught. I run into them occasionally. Small-town life makes complete avoidance impossible. These encounters are polite but cold. We exchange the kind of minimal pleasantries you might share with strangers in an elevator. There's no warmth, no family connection, no shared history that matters anymore. Because here's what I've learned about family and forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can forgive them for my own peace of mind without welcoming them back into my life. I can release my anger without restoring their access to my trust. I can move forward without moving backward. The little girl inside me who used to desperately want her family's approval has grown up into a woman who values her own integrity more than anyone else's acceptance. The people who raised me taught me many valuable lessons, just not the ones they intended. They taught me that family loyalty should never trump personal boundaries. They taught me that love without respect is manipulation. They taught me that trust, once broken systematically, doesn't automatically heal with time or shared DNA. Most importantly, they taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who treat your well-being as acceptable collateral damage for their wants. I sleep better now than I have in years, not because my life is perfect, but because it's honest. Every relationship I have is built on genuine foundation rather than obligation or manipulation. Every financial decision I make is mine alone. Every boundary I set is respected because the people in my life now understand that boundaries aren't suggestions. The woman who answered that 2:47 a.m. phone call 3 years ago was someone who believed family came first, no matter what. The woman writing this story is someone who knows that she comes first, and that true family will support that principle rather than exploit it. That transformation from victim to survivor to thriver is worth more than any mortgage, any credit score, any amount of money they stole from me. Some people ask if I ever regret pursuing criminal charges against my own family, if I ever wish I'd handled things privately or worked it out without involving law enforcement. The answer is simple: absolutely not. The criminal justice system exists to protect people from predators. The fact that these particular predators shared my DNA doesn't make their crimes any less serious or their victims any less deserving of justice. If anything, their willingness to systematically exploit family relationships makes them more dangerous than random criminals, not less. I protected future victims by ensuring real consequences for systematic fraud. I created legal precedent that family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior. I demonstrated that trust has limits and violations have consequences. Most importantly, I saved myself. Today, I live in a world where my signature means something because only I can authorize its use, where my credit represents my actual financial choices, where my family is made up of people who value my well-being as much as their own. That 2:47 a.m. phone call was the worst thing that happened to me that year, and simultaneously the best thing that ever happened to my life. Because sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who they really are, so you can build something better.